Action.
Action. All right. The placement of the shoulder pads. But if they crumpled up, you want to kind of give them a quick little pressing to make sure that they have a nice shape. So we get the little wrinkles on. Now the shoulder pad goes in after you finish your neckline. You have to slip the neckline first, which I haven't done, and then you place your shoulder pads. And you have to kind of line it up, like this is the back, this is the front. And when you look at the shoulder pad, you notice that there is a notch here, and that one side is long and one side is short. Because when you fold it, right here where the notch is, you find that this one is longer. The longer side belongs in the front because you have a kind of like a dip in here and you're trying to fill it out so when the jacket hangs on your body it's nice and flat and doesn't sink in. So these are the tailored shoulder pads and you should always use this kind for jackets or coats. So it sits like that. So in order to do this, we'll fold it in half. Not in half, we'll fold it at the notch. And then you determine, let's see, this one, what side you're on. It's my back. And this is my, oh, I did have the right one, sorry. So, this folds, and then you also, you don't, line it up with your seam line. Do not line up, you line up with the cutting line of the seam because the shoulder pad has to extend a little bit over the seam so that the sleeve can roll real nice. And you don't get that if you bring it in because then the sleeve just sort of falls down. Then after this, you're going to use a hand needle and thread, and only in the center of the shoulder seam, you're going to slip stitch the shoulder pad onto the shoulder seam, but don't sew all the way through, just sew it, into the seam allowance, okay? Then after you finish that, you just basically let it fall open, and then when you bring it through, it just kind of, you see, it falls into place. It's secure over the shoulder, so you don't have to worry about it anymore. It just does it all by itself, okay? All right, that's the shoulder pad. Now we're doing a couple things here in a little bit because we kind of pressed for time. So after that, and then when you put your, okay, just a second, getting a little bit, both sleeves have to be trimmed, your lining on the lower between the two seams on the bottom, trim down to 1/4. The same on the outer sleeves. So when you put them inside of each other, they don't gather up underneath your arm. You have more room for, so that they on the inside, see, they fall nice and flat and don't get all, because if you have too much seam allowance under here, it's going to get in the way of each other. Now, before we do the hem, you have to go back in here and you take your two little seams and you kind of like these little seams, you hold them, you find because they have the same seams, the lining and your outer, same seams. You kind of find those seams where they line up, and you kind of lay them against each other, and then you just you tack them with a couple stitches right here by the, where they meet. One here, then the other one on the other side. And you got to find the seams though that are from your sleeves, okay? Not the garment, the sleeve seams, okay? The outer and the inner, okay? Tack that on both sleeves. Then when we get to the lining, you kind of lay your garment on top of each other. Kind of try to make sure the lining see, this is not quite done, so we're just kind of trying to get a demo in so that you guys can look it up. Okay, so you try to, you see, you pin up your outer hem, which is 1.5 inches, okay? So now, before I go on, I'm going to press this. So follow me. I'm going to press this real quick because I need it pressed in order to tell you the next thing. Make sure it's lined up real nice. And because your hem is actually on a slight curve, so that's why you see these little bubbles. So when you start pinning it, you pin by lining up your seams first, and then you find the center, and like in here, you try now, you come from the bottom and you shrink that. You see, you have to shrink it. Now, sometimes when you have a whole lot of stuff, you can go back and actually make little seams in here, take it out in the seam. But not for this project. I'm just saying, when you have a real curved seam, it's kind of like a little dart. You make an adjustment in the seam, you come out and then you go back in. But this don't require that. I just always like to add, little options that come up when you start sewing. So it just depends on your pattern. But we need to know where this hem is in order to do the next step. Somebody got a machine set up? Because I have not. I need somebody's machine.
Mine is.
Yeah, maybe I can just pin it. I'm not sure.
Mine is set up.
Yeah, okay.
It's pink thread. So.
Now, basically, after you pressed it, you want to remove the pins again. Yep, it's getting crunch time, so a lot of these things I cannot always keep up with you because I'm too busy trying to help you. So that's why this is a little bit unfinished on some level. But we'll get it good enough so you can follow what you need to do. I'm going to go back and do it right later. Okay. All right, now follow me back. Basically, are these mine? Because I had two of them. Yeah. Basically, it's so nice and quiet. The pattern, when you do patterns, like jacket, coats, lining, usually the difference between the lining and the outer garment when it comes to the pattern is the hems are always, the lining is always minus the hem, like the outer. So the ideal would be that it lines up just like that, you know, right there. But as you work a garment, that doesn't always come out that way. You know, in the end, you might have a slight difference, so you want to make sure that everything is okay, because we're going to machine him the hem. And so what you want to do is you lay out your garment, and the best part is always, you know, right around your waistline here. If the garment kind of flattens now, and then we're just going to put a couple pins in here to stabilize this area. See, it's like the pocket is right there. Just so that it, you know, you make sure this comes all the way down. And see, mostly I'm pretty much, like in here I'm okay, but here it shifts a little. So sometimes the way you sew your seams, line them up, you know, things don't always come 100%. But close is good too. All right, so I got this here, and I got my hem. See, there's a little shift in here. You know, sometimes you pull the seam a little differently. Okay, so this looks like this. Okay, I think I'm happy with that. I pin it so I can then pull it and look at it from this side to see where I'm off. See? Now most of this is good, but I got a couple little ends that are sticking out. So basically you're trying to, you see, like on this side here, for whatever reason, I came a little long in here. So I'm just going to trim this just a little bit to offset that. Okay, now I'm going to pin it back, move it back around. Then there are different ways you can do this as far as machine sew the hem. You can have an opening in your inside of your sleeve and work through that, but I find that harder to do, so I figured out an easier way. Another thing is if you open up a seam in here and then slip stitch it back close, but most of the time, you know, in your learning process, it's sometimes hard to put it back together perfectly. So I figured that if we open up the right facing seam here, where the facing and the lining comes together, about halfway to you know, approximately where your waistline is. Just kind of take that loose, and not this side. This side has 4 inches loose, but this side we're going to bring up a little higher. And the reason for that is because now, you know, we all set. We got this okay, we got that okay. I graded my seams. I can grade the lining seams. Why do I grade seams?
Cut down on bulk.
Yes, we're trying to keep the bulk out of things. You know, everybody likes to look a couple pounds lighter, right? And you'd be amazed how these little things will put seams together on a much, you know, nicer way. So right now you see, you know, you see it like this. What you're going to do now is you're going to take your lining